My name is Jenna Mercer. I'm 32, and last month I learned that my own mother had filed a lawsuit to force me out of the home I've been paying for, just so my older sister could have more closet space. It happened on a Thursday morning. I opened my front door to take my son to school, and there it was, an envelope taped to the frame stamped with the county seal. At first, I thought it was some HOA notice. It wasn't. It was a court summons, with my mother's name listed as the plaintiff. I read the complaint 3 times. She wasn't just asking for the house back. She wanted me removed. Legally. Immediately. The reason: property reassignment needed to accommodate elder daughter's personal storage requirements. They sued me because my sister wanted a bigger closet. I felt my stomach drop. My hands were shaking so hard the pages rattled. And right behind me, my 8-year-old son tugged on my shirt and whispered, "Mom, why is your name on that paper? Did we do something wrong?" I didn't even know how to answer him. But the worst part wasn't the summons. It was what I found inside the envelope's back pocket: documents I had never signed, agreements I had never seen, and one line that made my heart stop: defendant has failed to comply with the revised maintenance and payment terms submitted 8 months prior. There were no revised terms. Someone had created them, and someone had signed my name. And that was only the beginning. Because in court, when the judge saw the suitcase my sister brought with her, everything changed. If you've ever dealt with favoritism, betrayal, or family members who crossed lines, you never thought they would tell me where you're watching from. And if you want more real stories like this, hit subscribe so you never miss the ending you deserve. The following Monday, I walked into the Maricopa County Civil Records Office with a tightness in my chest that I couldn't shake. A clerk directed me to a small review room and handed me a thin stack of printed documents. I sat down, spread everything across the table, and froze when I saw the first page of the so-called revised terms. My name sat at the bottom in a signature that looked identical to mine. Same slant, same pressure, same looping M, but I had never signed it. The addendum demanded higher monthly payments and listed multiple maintenance obligations I had never agreed to, all retroactively dated. I stared at the sheets, trying to understand how something like this had been accepted into an official filing. Before the panic could take over, my attorney, Alex Rowan, stepped inside. He closed the door gently and sat across from me, scanning the documents with a level of focus that made the room feel even smaller. "This isn't just sloppy paperwork," he said. "This is constructed. Whoever prepared this knew exactly what they were doing." He tapped the signature line. "If we prove this wasn't yours, it opens up an entirely different set of consequences for the plaintiffs." His voice was calm, but the implication was heavy. I had walked in fearing eviction. Now I was staring at something that looked deliberately engineered. Alex asked the clerk for the original submission envelope. When she returned, she placed a sealed plastic sleeve on the table. Inside were more pages, copies of payment logs, inspection forms, and correspondence I had never written. Every letterhead bore my address. Every signature looked like mine. "They expected you not to check," Alex said quietly. "But you did. That helps us." After leaving the courthouse, I drove home in silence. The sun was still high when I pulled into the driveway, but the house looked different, as if it belonged to someone else for a moment. Before I could unlock the door, a familiar car parked behind me. My sister Lauren Mercer stepped out with a bright smile, carrying a folder of glossy printouts. "Perfect timing," she said, walking past me toward the porch. "I brought some ideas. Once the closet wall comes down, I'm thinking built-ins all the way across. Maybe a vanity, too." She spread the images out on the patio table. Expensive closet systems, shoe walls, lighting upgrades. She spoke with excitement, completely unbothered by the fact that I still lived here. Behind the screen door, Evan lingered, watching her quietly. When she finally left, he stepped outside and pressed into my side. "Mom," he whispered, "are we going to have to move?" I heard her say she wants our room. I hushed him and told him I was handling it, but inside fear twisted like a knot. By late afternoon, I returned to the courthouse to submit a formal request for original signatures. At the front desk, the same clerk who helped me earlier leaned in, slightly lowering her voice. "You didn't hear it from me," she said, "but they brought another suitcase this morning." That Friday evening, I drove to my parents' house for a dinner they insisted I attend. I hesitated on the porch, knowing the conversation would not be pleasant, but I stepped inside when my father opened the door. The dining table was already set, and everyone looked as if they had been waiting specifically for me. I sat down, trying to steady myself, and for a moment the room felt unnervingly quiet. My mother, Patricia Mercer, broke the silence first. She spoke with the tone she used whenever she believed she was being perfectly reasonable. "This situation has gone on long enough," she said. "The house is small. Lauren needs more space. It's unfair to expect her to squeeze her things into that tiny room." She didn't raise her voice, but the firmness of her words made it clear she had rehearsed them. Across the table, my sister Lauren Mercer nodded as if this had already been unanimously agreed upon. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Once the closet wall comes down, the whole layout opens up. I've already talked to someone who can remove it and rebuild the interior. There's a lot of potential there, Jenna. You're not using the space right." She spoke about my home the way a contractor talks about a renovation project, as if it were already hers, as if my life and my son's room were just details in her design plan. My father avoided my eyes, cutting his food slowly, pretending this was a normal family discussion. I kept my voice steady. "I live there. Evan lives there. You're talking like I'm a guest in my own house." Patricia waved her hand gently as if brushing aside an unimportant comment. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be. We're simply reorganizing things so both of our daughters can thrive." Her use of the word reorganizing felt deliberate, like she was describing moving furniture rather than forcing me out of my home. In the middle of her explanation, she reached into her purse to grab her reading glasses. A folded sheet slipped out and fluttered onto the floor by my feet. I bent down and picked it up before she could react. The page was a printed estimate from a local real estate group, Desert Sky Realtor Group. At the top, bold and unmistakable, were the words, "Estimated flip value." The number beneath it made my stomach clench. It wasn't just a casual inquiry. It was a plan, a financial projection, a clear indication that they had spoken to realtors who believed my home could be resold for a substantial profit once minor interior updates were made. I looked up slowly, holding the sheet between my fingers. My mother stiffened, her expression flattening into something unreadable. Lauren, however, didn't bother hiding her intentions. She smirked, tapping her manicured nails on the table. "You weren't supposed to see that yet," she said. "But honestly, it's better this way. At least now you understand why we're doing this." My father cleared his throat, finally looking at me. "It's just business, Jenna. Business." That was the justification they chose for displacing their own daughter and grandson. After dinner, I stepped into the yard for air. Lauren followed me out, scrolling through her phone with a sense of urgency. She stopped a few feet away, lifted the phone to her ear, and said clearly, "Hi, yes, this is Lauren. I'm ready to move forward with the evaluation. Can you come by next week?" She made the call while looking directly at me. The morning of the hearing arrived with a heaviness I couldn't ignore. I walked into the courtroom behind my attorney, Alex Rowan, and felt the sharp contrast between the quiet hallway outside and the rigid formality inside. The judge's bench towered over the room, and every sound, footsteps, shuffling papers, whispered conversations seemed amplified. I took my seat at the respondent's table, trying to steady my breathing. A moment later, the door opened, and Lauren Mercer entered, pulling a large black suitcase behind her. The wheels clattered across the floor, breaking the silence. She positioned it beside the plaintiff's table with a confident expression, as if bringing luggage into a courtroom were perfectly normal. My mother, Patricia Mercer, sat next to her, hands folded neatly, eyes fixed forward, as though she had practiced this posture. When the bailiff called the room to order, Judge Marla O'Neill stepped to her bench. Her presence was calm but commanding, and the room instantly fell still. She glanced briefly at both sides before signaling the plaintiff's counsel to begin. Their attorney stood, straightened his tie, and announced that the case centered on my consistent failure to maintain the property as agreed, claiming I had not upheld my responsibilities. He slid a stack of printed photos across the table toward the judge, each one highlighting minor wear: a loose fence board, a stain on the patio, a shrub that had grown unevenly by the front walkway. These conditions, he said, demonstrate ongoing neglect. The property cannot remain in the defendant's possession if she refuses to uphold basic standards. Alex rose slowly, took the photos, and held them for barely a second before setting them down. "Your Honor," he said, "every one of these images is intentionally misleading." He pulled out his tablet, opened a folder of date-stamped files, and turned it toward the judge. "These are the same areas photographed by a licensed inspector just 2 weeks prior. Each image showed clean repairs, fresh paint, and recent maintenance that matched receipts Alex then presented." The judge leaned forward, studying the photos with clear attention. The plaintiff's attorney shifted uneasily but didn't speak. Patricia kept her gaze locked on the bench, while Lauren bit her lower lip, her posture stiffening. As Alex addressed each point, he dismantled the accusations with meticulous evidence. He pointed out the discrepancies in timestamps, the lack of official documentation, and the inconsistencies between the plaintiff's narrative and the actual records. The judge listened without interruption, occasionally glancing at the black suitcase beside Lauren. That suitcase began drawing her attention more with each minute. It sat upright, zipped tightly, its handle extended almost like a silent participant in the proceedings. Lauren seemed increasingly distracted by it, adjusting the straps, shifting its position, nervously checking the zipper even when no one asked her to touch it. Judge O'Neill's eyes narrowed slightly. She leaned back, folded her hands, and let a long moment of silence settle across the room. Then her gaze returned to the suitcase, lingering this time. Lauren froze, sensing the shift. The judge finally spoke, her voice firm and unmistakable. "Ms. Mercer, bring that suitcase here." The courtroom stayed silent after Judge Marla O'Neill's command, and Lauren Mercer hesitated before standing. She gripped the handle of the black suitcase and rolled it slowly toward the bench, the wheels echoing against the polished floor. The judge motioned for the bailiff to open it, and everyone watched as the latches snapped apart. Inside was a neatly stacked collection of folders, binders, and labeled envelopes. The bailiff lifted the top binder and handed it to the judge. The title on the cover, written in bold typed letters, read, "Property Resale Preparation, Mercer Residence." My breath caught in my throat. Judge O'Neill flipped open the binder. The first page was a draft real estate listing, complete with property description, projected list price, and notes from a staging consultant. It described my home as vacant-ready and outlined cosmetic upgrades that would maximize value within a 30-day turnaround. None of this had been created by me. The judge passed the folder to Alex Rowan, and he scanned it quickly. His jaw tightened. The bailiff retrieved the next binder, a detailed staging plan showing mock-ups of my living room, bedroom, backyard, and garage. Someone had already measured every wall. Someone had already priced the decor. Someone had already planned the open house schedule. Then came the contractor packet estimates for repainting, rewiring, and knocking down interior sections. A full-page floor plan included hand-drawn arrows pointing directly at Evan's bedroom closet. It was the same closet Lauren had bragged about opening up. There were printed emails, too, organized in chronological order, showing conversations between my family and 2 realtors from the Desert Sky Realtor Group. They discussed timelines, profit margins, and closing expectations months before the lawsuit had even been filed. The judge's expression hardened. Lauren shifted uncomfortably, trying to look composed, but her voice cracked when she spoke. "Those are just planning materials. Nothing's official." Alex stood. "Your Honor, none of these documents show any intention of the defendant participating in a sale. They're preparing to dispose of a home that doesn't legally belong to them." Before anyone else could speak, Evan, who had been sitting quietly beside me, leaned forward and whispered loud enough for the microphone to catch, "This is our house." The entire room fell still. Judge O'Neill closed the binder and addressed the bailiff. "Seal the suitcase and place it under court custody." Effective immediately. The suitcase was locked, tagged, and moved to the evidence table. The plaintiff's attorney attempted to regain control. "Your Honor, the defendant is mischaracterizing." The judge raised a hand sharply. "I've seen enough of the materials." She turned to the clerk. "Bring me the original contract packet submitted at the start of proceedings." The clerk retrieved a separate folder from the evidence cart and handed it over. Judge O'Neill opened it, studying the final page, the official addendum I had signed years earlier. After a long pause, she set it beside the addendum submitted by my family. The difference was obvious. The signatures were not remotely alike. She looked up, her tone colder than before. "This," she said, tapping the real addendum, "is the authentic signature." Her eyes shifted to the falsified one. "And this is not." The tension in the courtroom deepened as the clerk returned to her seat and Judge Marla O'Neill laid both addendums flat before her. A quiet rustle moved through the room when she lifted the forged document again, studying it with the same precision she had shown throughout the hearing. I felt Alex shift slightly beside me, preparing to speak when she opened the floor. He rose with deliberate calm. "Your Honor, the differences between these two addendums are not minor. The authentic version contains the original payment terms, the agreed maintenance responsibilities, and the signature my client actually provided. The one submitted by the plaintiffs includes additional conditions, altered timelines, and a replicated signature that does not match the defendant's verified handwriting." He pointed to the forged page. "This document could not have come from Ms. Mercer. It contradicts every verified record." Judge O'Neill nodded, then turned her attention to the plaintiff's table. "Mrs. Mercer, did you personally submit this altered addendum to the court?" My mother, Patricia Mercer, stiffened. Her lips parted, but no words followed. She looked to her attorney, then to Lauren, and then back at the judge. I don't know how that ended up in the file," she said weakly. The judge's gaze sharpened. "That is not an answer to my question." Patricia blinked rapidly, her voice trembling. "I believed it was correct when I signed. You signed this version." Judge O'Neill lifted the forged addendum slightly. Patricia's silence was answer enough. The judge shifted her focus. "Ms. Lauren Mercer, did you prepare or contribute to the preparation of this falsified document?" Lauren straightened, trying to maintain composure. "I helped organize some of the paperwork, but I didn't create anything illegal. We were just trying to clarify the agreement." "Clarify?" The judge repeated, her tone flat. "By adding new financial obligations and forging a signature," Lauren faltered. "I didn't forge anything." Alex stepped forward. "Your Honor, we would like the record to note that the plaintiffs had access to the defendant's mail for months prior to this dispute and obtained documents containing her signature. The replication is consistent with traced or digitally manipulated handwriting." Judge O'Neill held up a hand. "It's noted." She leaned back in her chair, took a slow breath, and folded her hands. The room went silent, so silent that even the hum of the overhead lights seemed loud. "This court," she began, "finds overwhelming evidence that the plaintiffs knowingly submitted falsified documents with the intention of misrepresenting the terms of the original agreement. The defendant has demonstrated consistent compliance with her obligations. The plaintiffs have not." She lifted the authentic addendum. "As such, the court hereby dismisses the plaintiff's claim with prejudice." Patricia gasped. Lauren's face drained of color. Judge O'Neill wasn't finished. "Furthermore, due to the intentional submission of false material, this case will be referred for additional civil review. The court will forward all relevant evidence, including the suitcase contents, to the proper division." She paused. "The plaintiffs are also prohibited from contacting or approaching the defendant's minor child, effective immediately." A ripple of shock moved through the entire room. I exhaled slowly, my hands trembling as the weight of months finally lifted. Then, unexpectedly, my mother rose from her seat. Her shoulders shook and tears streamed down her face as she stumbled toward the aisle. "Jenna," she cried out, her voice breaking, "please, please forgive me. I never meant for it to go this far." Her plea echoed through the courtroom, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The weeks that followed moved with a strangely steady rhythm each day, marking a shift I could finally control. After the court ruling, I met with a mortgage advisor to begin the refinance process. The numbers were heavy but manageable with my income, and the relief of separating myself from my family's financial reach outweighed everything else. The paperwork stretched across my kitchen table as I signed each page, ensuring every trace of their names disappeared from the deed. When the confirmation email arrived, transfer complete. I stared at the screen for several seconds, letting the reality settle. The house was entirely mine. My next steps were decisive. I blocked every contact from my parents and from Lauren. There was no satisfaction in it, but the silence that followed was necessary. For years, their involvement in my life had come with demands, conditions, and unspoken obligations. Cutting that line felt like taking my first full breath in months. Word traveled faster than I expected. A colleague mentioned seeing Lauren at a cafe arguing loudly over a phone call about her credit card balances. Without the house flip she had counted on, the renovation purchases she had pre-charged became her own problem. Her plans for a new car, new furniture, and a designer wardrobe evaporated. The reality of debt settled in. She tried reaching me through unknown numbers for a while, but each attempt went unanswered. Patricia faced her own fallout. The HOA board sent a formal letter requesting her presence at a review meeting regarding the misuse of community legal channels. Their bylaws allowed for disciplinary action against members who filed fraudulent claims involving neighborhood property disputes. She apparently tried to defend herself, but the board held firm. A neighbor who attended the meeting told someone at work that Patricia left the room pale and shaking. Douglas, overwhelmed by the tension at home, moved out temporarily. I heard indirectly that he rented a small apartment near the airport to clear his head. He had always avoided confrontation, but this time the weight of the situation pushed him further than expected. His absence only heightened the strain between my parents and Lauren, creating a fracture none of them knew how to mend. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding a sense of ease in my own home. I repaired the minor damages left from their last visit, repainted the entryway, and rearranged the furniture to feel less crowded. Evan started sleeping better, no longer waking from the anxious dreams he used to have when people argued downstairs. One evening, he asked me if we were safe now, and I told him yes, without hesitation. The day the refinance funds cleared, a locksmith arrived right on schedule. I walked him through the front door, the side entrance, and the garage access, watching as each old lock clicked free from its frame. The new hardware gleamed under the afternoon light, clean and untouched. When he handed me the fresh set of keys, the weight of them felt different, solid, earned, final. After he left, I stood alone on the porch. The quiet around me wasn't empty. It was peaceful. For the first time since inheriting the house, there was no fear of someone walking in without permission, no tension coiled beneath the surface, no threat waiting in the next envelope or phone call. Just stillness. I locked the door behind me with a steady hand. That simple turn of the key felt like reclaiming every piece of my life they had tried to take. A few days later, I took Evan for an afternoon walk along one of the quieter trails at South Mountain Park. The air was warm, the desert shrubs still catching the last of the daylight, and he kept close to me as we followed the winding path. After a long stretch of silence, he tugged lightly at my sleeve. "They're not coming back, right?" His voice was small but steady enough to tell me he already knew the answer. I knelt beside him so he could see my face clearly. "No," I said. "They won't take our home again. Boundaries keep us safe. Remember that." He nodded, the tension leaving his shoulders, as if he finally believed the ground beneath us wasn't going to shift anymore. We continued walking, and I found myself thinking about how hard it had been to accept the truth that family isn't defined by shared blood, but by shared respect. Setting a boundary isn't an act of cruelty, it's an act of protection. In my case, it protected my son, my home, my stability, and my sanity. This experience also taught me something else, something I wish more people understood. In the United States, fraud isn't softened by family ties. When someone forges signatures, fabricates documents, or manipulates property for personal gain, the law treats it with the seriousness it deserves. Loyalty doesn't excuse exploitation, and love doesn't justify deceit. Sometimes the only path forward requires distance, even if that distance feels like a loss. A safe home can come at a high emotional cost, but peace is worth every step it takes to reach it. If you've stayed with me until this moment, thank you. Your time matters, and I'm grateful you chose to spend part of your day listening to my story. If you faced something similar, whether it was betrayal, manipulation, or the difficult process of protecting yourself, I invite you to share it. Someone else might need to hear what you've learned. And if you'd like to support more stories like this, I'd be honored to have you subscribe. Your support helps these voices be heard.